There are questions that have echoed through the human soul for centuries. Why do those who have been broken carry a strength that defies explanation? Why do wounds, instead of burying us, become seeds of wisdom and compassion? And why, in a world so loud and hurried, do empaths, those seemingly fragile beings, end up reflecting the very truths everyone else tries to hide? Imagine walking into a vast hall. There are no voices, no music, only a silence so profound you can hear your own heartbeat. In that stillness you sense countless souls gathering, each carrying a hidden wound like a secret talisman. You see their eyes cast downward. You hear the faint breath of memories that were never spoken aloud. Here brokenness is not a shame, it is truth, it is the beginning. The broken empath is often labeled as too sensitive, too soft, too fragile. But in truth, they are like instruments strung too tightly, which is why they can hear melodies that others miss. They perceive what hides behind a smile. They feel the sorrow that never made it into tears. And that very sensitivity, when misunderstood, becomes a crushing weight. But once awakened, it transforms into a rare power, the power to turn pain into wisdom and cracks into channels of light. Tonight, we will walk that path together, the journey of the broken empath. This is not merely a talk, not just a narrative, it is a rite of passage. Because together, we will reopen the wounds long buried in dust, face the shadows we have avoided, and learn to listen to the whispers that rise from the dark. I do not stand here as a prophet or a saint. I stand as a mirror, for everything you are about to hear is not foreign. It already lives within your own experience in those sleepless nights, in the moments you collapsed, believing you would never rise again, in the tears you never let anyone see. Those moments are the raw material of this journey. We will begin where most people are afraid to look, with the breaking. Not with light, not with comforting lessons, but with darkness, the place where your heart was torn by betrayal, abandonment, abuse, or indifference. That is where the first crack appeared. That is where you thought you lost everything. But it is also where the seed of rebirth was planted. And then, through each chapter, we will explore together why personal wounds can become mirrors for the collective wounds of humanity. Why the wolf in the dark, the buried instinct, is in fact the piece of your soul that you must reclaim. Why hope is not an illusion, but the eternal flame that has always flickered through your darkest night. And finally, why the broken empath is not merely a victim, but a wounded healer, a bridge between light and shadow, between the human and the divine. This introduction is a doorway. You can choose to remain outside, safe within your familiar stories. Or you can choose to step through trembling, perhaps, but ready to discover that your breaking open is not your end. It is an invitation, an initiation into a journey unlike any other. A journey that does not promise ease, but promises truth, liberation, and a rare power that this world desperately needs. Take a deep breath. Let these words do more than pass through your mind. Let them touch the wound you still carry in your chest. Because from this moment on, for the next 60 minutes, we will walk together through the darkness, gather the fragments, and uncover the flame that can never be extinguished. When we talk about brokenness, most people immediately think of tragedy, loss, or failure. In modern society, we glorify flawless stories, heroes who always win, the strong who rise without falling, figures without a single crack. Yet there is an unspoken truth few dare to admit. All true strength is forged in fracture. Think back to the moment when your world collapsed. It could have been a breakup, a betrayal, an abandoned childhood, or simply the instant you realized that the world is not as kind as you once believed. That was the moment you shattered. Others may not have seen it, but inside the foundations of your being trembled, and from that day on you were no longer the same person. Psychology calls this trauma, but on a deeper archetypal level, it is an initiation ritual. Ancient civilizations understood this well. No soul attains wisdom without passing through the gate of suffering. Young initiates of the tribe had to face ordeals, isolation in the wilderness, cuts carved into their skin, or direct confrontation with primal fear, so that upon their return they were no longer children but adults. The wound was the proof of transformation. In modern life, we have lost those rituals. Yet life itself, in its ruthless wisdom, still imposes its own. For the empath, that ritual is the breaking of the heart, not once, but many times. Not in a single story, but repeated across relationships and experiences, as if the universe keeps bringing you back to the same lesson. Learn to face it. Learn not to dissolve. Learn to find strength in your own fragments. Do you remember the first time you were betrayed? It wasn't just disappointment. It was the collapse of an inner world. The person you trusted most became the one who hurt you the deepest. That moment was carved into your memory not in words, but in a silent fracture etched into your bones. From then on, you walked with an invisible crack that only you could feel. And yet, that crack made you more sensitive. You began to notice what others overlooked: the tremor in someone's voice, the emptiness behind a smile, the scent of loneliness in a crowded room. At first, you thought it was a curse, that you were too sensitive, too weak, not fit for this world. But slowly, if you were brave enough, you began to see the crack had opened new eyes within you. In symbolic language, a fracture is not an ending, it is a slit of light. When the vessel cracks, water may spill, but it is also the only way light can enter. When the heart breaks, love may bleed, but that is also when a greater love, one that transcends the personal, begins to flow in. What matters is this: do not rush to seal the crack. Society will tell you to be strong, move on, act as if nothing happened. But if you close the wound too quickly, you also close the doorway to awakening. The awakened empath does not rush to heal with a bandage. They allow the wound to breathe, to teach them. This is the difference between a victim and a wounded healer. The victim sees the wound as fate proof of helplessness. The wounded healer sees the wound as a portal proof that they have walked through darkness and still stand. One remains trapped in tragedy. The other uses tragedy as a milestone to go farther. In Greek mythology, there is Chiron, the immortal centaur, cursed with a wound that would never heal. He could not cure himself, yet from that very wound he became a great healer, teaching the art of medicine to gods and humans alike. The empath is much the same. The wound does not vanish, it walks beside you. But it no longer weighs you down, it testifies that you survived what others feared to face. Look back at your own life. How many times have you shattered? How many times did you think, this time I'll never rise again? How many times did you ask, why must I endure so much? The answer may never come in words, but if you listen closely, you might notice something. Each time you broke, you saw the world differently. You lost your naivety, but not your heart. You became deeper. You learned that pain is not the enemy, it is the sternest teacher. Fracture is initiation. It takes you from unconsciousness to awareness, from confusion to wisdom. It transforms you from one swept away by emotion into one who observes emotion like a river, not to drown in it, but to learn to swim through it. In the minutes ahead, we will travel further along this path. But for now, let yourself acknowledge one thing. Your cracks are not your shame, they are your doorway. You are not merely the wounded one. You are the survivor of a sacred initiation life designed uniquely for you. And that means you have already begun your journey as a healer, not through perfection, but through the holy openness of your own breaking. If fracture is initiation, then the second step in the empath's journey is the encounter with the wolf, the primal image of the instinct long banished to the shadows. No true healing journey avoids this meeting, because the wolf represents everything society, family, and even you yourself have rejected since the beginning. Imagine a dream. You are walking through a forest at night. The sky is thick and black, branches clawing across your path. The wind howls in your ears and you shiver. Suddenly, from the darkness, two glowing eyes fix on you. A wolf emerges. It growls, white fangs gleaming, sturdy legs circling you as if ready to strike. You stand frozen, trembling. In that instant, you believe you will be devoured. But the wolf does not attack. It circles you, waiting. You wake in sweat, heart pounding, and then a thought haunts you. The wolf was never just a predator. It was the part of your soul you once exiled. For the empath, the wolf is the symbol of every wild energy that has ever been suppressed. Anger, desire, the instinct for self-protection, the voice that says no when boundaries are crossed. From childhood, you were taught to be kind, gentle, giving, and forgiving. You were encouraged to be a good person, even if that meant ignoring your own pain. And so, in order to be loved, to be accepted, you push the wolf into the shadows. But darkness does not erase it. It only makes the wolf hungrier, waiting for its return. The empath doesn't realize it, but denying that instinct makes them more vulnerable. They open their hearts without boundaries, give without limits, endure without end. And then, as if by law, manipulators, narcissists, and abusers arrive. They can smell the softness, the absence of boundaries, and they bite. Here we must face a bitter truth. Compassion without the wolf becomes a chain. It makes you confuse love with servitude, patience with self-destruction, kindness with submission. When you do not allow your inner wolf to speak, you will continue to be devoured by the darkness of others. In Jungian psychology, the wolf belongs to the shadow, the part of us we repress to preserve the image of being good. Yet, paradoxically, only when you dare to look into the wolf's blazing eyes do you find the strength you've been searching for. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the rest of you, the part that, if denied, will turn inward and destroy you. Remember, the wolf doesn't only want to devour it, also wants to protect. In nature, wolves live in packs. They are fierce when needed, but deeply loyal to their territory and kin. Their instinct is boundary, and boundary is what the empath most often lacks. When you deny the wolf, you also deny your capacity to defend yourself. Therefore, the empath's healing journey cannot be only about cultivating gentleness. It must also be about summoning the wolf to stand beside gentleness, to roar when needed, to say no to invading hands. Only then does compassion cease to be a tool for others to exploit. Return to that dream. The wolf did not attack. It waited. It wanted you to look into its eyes and admit, "You are part of me." When you do, something changes. The growl no longer terrifies. It becomes strength pulsing in your chest. You don't lose compassion, but compassion now stands backed by fierceness. You no longer just feel the pain of others. You also guard your own boundaries. You no longer only pity, you know righteous anger, and that is whole love. Empaths often believe compassion means always forgiving, always giving, always enduring. But true compassion is never separate from sharpness. A mother loves her child not only with open arms, but with claws when danger approaches. A person who truly loves themselves does so not only with tenderness, but with the resolve to allow no one to trample their worth. Compassion does not exclude strength. It requires strength to survive. And when the wolf returns, a new power awakens the power of grounded presence. It is the ability to sit beside the hopeless without being pulled into their abyss, to listen to a painful story without breaking, to meet the narcissist's gaze without being hypnotized. Because within you, the wolf now stands guard. From here, you begin to understand something profound. Love is not about dissolving into another. Real love is the meeting of two whole souls, each carrying both light and shadow. And when you keep the wolf beside your heart, you no longer seek love from a place of pleading. You give love from the sovereignty of a soul that can protect itself. This is the turning point of the journey. From broken, you move into broken open, open to your own darkness, open to the exiled instinct, open to rebirth through the very power you once feared. Only then does your compassion become truly free, no longer the chain that pulls you back to the abuser. The wolf in the dark has not come to destroy you. It has come to ask, will you dare to become whole? There is an ancient image shared across East and West. The flame, fire is light, life, and faith. Yet fire also burns, destroys, and dissolves all things. That is why it is both worshipped and feared. For the broken empath, the healing journey is tied to such a flame, the same fire that once consumed them in the darkness of despair, and the same fire that now flickers quietly to guide them through the night. Remember the nights you thought all was lost, the silent room, memories replaying like ghosts, and you sitting there believing life had abandoned you. Your heart then was like cold ash, and yet beneath that grey dust a tiny ember remained, not bright, not loud, just a faint glow, but it was that faint light that kept you alive through the night. It whispered, "Do not give up." The empath's hope is not the cheap kind, bought by sweet promises or pink illusions. It is hope forged in fire, tested, nearly extinguished, and yet reborn in the most unexpected moment. It is not the hope of the naive, but of a soul that has touched the abyss. There is a great difference here. Naive hope avoids darkness, denies pain, and seeks comfort in illusions. But hope that has passed through fire is different. It looks straight into the dark, acknowledges the pain, and still stands. It does not need illusion to exist, for it knows that even when everything collapses, one thing remains indestructible: the inner flame. Across spiritual traditions, fire has always symbolized the immortal soul. The Jews keep an eternal lamp burning in the temple. The Greeks pass the torch as a symbol of knowledge and life. In the East, flame is seen as the sacred breath connecting heaven and earth. And within every broken empath, that same flame testifies: death is not the end, and darkness is never absolute. You may not notice it, but every time you rise after believing you couldn't, it is that flame at work. Every time you hold someone in pain without fleeing, it is that flame guiding you. Every time you choose honesty over pretending to be strong, it is that flame shining bright. But this flame does not appear by accident. It is born of endurance. It emerges only when everything else has burned away. It is the fire of the phoenix. Only when the old self has turned to ash can the soul be reborn. That is why the broken empath carries such a rare kind of hope. They have walked through fire, and therefore no ordinary wind can ever extinguish their light. You might ask, why does the world need this kind of hope? The answer is, because most people are still running from the dark. They seek comfort on the surface in short-lived pleasures and quick promises. When tragedy strikes, they collapse because their hope has never been tested by fire. But when they meet a broken open empath, someone still standing after walking through hell, they see living proof that survival is possible. A broken open empath doesn't need many words. Their presence is already a testament. Like a small candle in a dark room, it doesn't need to shout or show off. Its light is enough to prove that darkness is not all powerful. That is why those who suffer are drawn to you. They can't always name it, but they trust you because their soul recognizes that you have sat in the fire and you are still here. Hope that has passed through fire has a crucial trait. It does not promise everything will be easy. It only whispers you will survive. And sometimes, simply knowing you will survive gives a person the strength to take one more step. For the empath, offering this hope is not sugarcoating life. It is sharing the truth that you were once shattered and you rose. The truth that suffering did not kill you. It transformed you. In alchemy, there is a concept called mortificatio, decomposition, dissolution, a symbolic death. Alchemists believed that only when the old substance is burned can a new essence be born. So it is for the empath. The wounds, the fractures, the ashes, these are all part of the alchemical process. And it is precisely from those ashes that a new flame is born. There is a profound lesson here. Real hope is not the belief that everything will always be good. Real hope is the knowing that even when everything collapses, we can be reborn. This is the hope the empath carries. It is the flame within the ash. And when you recognize this, you begin to understand that your role is not only to heal yourself. You become a lamp for others. Not a blinding floodlight, but a light just bright enough for someone in the night to realize they are not alone. And sometimes that is the greatest gift a soul can give the world. Once the flame has been lit in the ashes, the next question is not, is it bright enough? But who will keep it? For fire, if untended, goes out. And once it goes out, darkness returns easily. The broken open empath is therefore called not only to experience hope, but to take on a responsibility, to become a keeper of the flame. Keeping the flame is not easy work. It is not standing before a crowd, holding the torch high, waiting for applause. It is quiet, constant work that requires patience and discipline. It is the choice each morning upon waking to return to yourself, to take one deep breath, to take one small step, just enough to sustain the light within. You may think, I'm just one small person. I can't carry such a responsibility. But in truth, this responsibility is not given to you as a burden. It is the natural result of your survival. You have passed through darkness. You kept your own flame alive, and therefore your very presence becomes a light for others. Whether you intend it or not, your soul stands as living evidence that darkness is not the end. Remember the image of a firekeeper in an ancient tribe. Each night when the village slept, a few were tasked with sitting by the coals. They knew that if the fire died, the village would sink into cold and dark. They needed no praise and no name. Their work was simple and sacred. Keep the fire alive through the night. The broken open empath today is humanity's firekeeper. But keeping the flame is not only about keeping it for yourself. It is also about limits and discernment. A common mistake empaths make is to try to carry their flame to everyone, handing out their light until they are exhausted. But light is not an object for endless distribution. It is an energy to be offered consciously, with selection and respect. Thus, part of the firekeeper's duty is to protect the flame from harsh winds. Some will come to you not to be warmed, but to extinguish. Some relationships will try to exploit your light to enrich their own darkness. If you are not alert, your flame can be drained. Keeping the flame is not only about sharing. It is also about knowing when to close the door and when to say no. Here lies the paradox. The firekeeper must be both open-hearted and well-bounded. They offer hope, but do not let that hope become dependency. They inspire, but do not allow others to lean on them as a permanent crutch. They know the flame's purpose is not for you to carry everyone's darkness, but to illuminate the hidden spark within their own ashes. And when another person recognizes their inner flame, they too become a keeper. In this way, light spreads not from a single torch, but from thousands, millions of small, persistent flames. This is the true responsibility. Not to be a savior, but to be the spark that awakens others. There is a beautiful image, the light of a candle. If you use your candle to light another, you lose nothing. The room only grows brighter. But to do this, you must first keep your own candle from being blown out. This is the core lesson for the empath. Tend your flame before you help others find theirs. To keep the flame also means never forgetting the night. You cannot be a keeper of the flame if you deny the existence of darkness. Your task is not to turn night into day, but to help people pass through the night without despair. Because you have sat in that night, you know how it feels, and for that reason, you are qualified to keep the fire. In the alchemical traditions, after the stage of ash comes the stage of new fire. The alchemist must both keep watch and wait with patience. So too with the empath. Your responsibility is to be patient with yourself, never forcing your healing, never rushing yourself to blaze. Keeping the flame means accepting that light waxes and wanes. Some days it flares, some days it's only embers, yet you tend it faithfully, knowing it will never disappear completely. When you truly step into the role of firekeeper, a new strength is born, the strength of steadfast presence. Others may waver, doubt, or run when hardship comes. But you, the one who has walked through darkness, know that running saves no one. You stay, you wait, you keep the light. And that presence, in itself, is the greatest gift you can give the world. There is a quiet law known to every soul that has suffered. The wound never vanishes entirely. It may stop bleeding and scar over, but it remains as memory in the flesh, as a lesson etched in bone. For many, the wound becomes an excuse to live in bitterness, defensiveness, or revenge. But for the broken open empath who has learned to keep the flame, the wound is no longer a chain. It becomes a wellspring of wisdom. Wisdom differs from knowledge. Knowledge is what you read in books, hear in lectures, absorb from outside. Wisdom is what you experience in the depths of your soul, and it comes only when you pass through your own darkness. One who has never been thirsty cannot truly understand the value of a drop of water. One who has never been betrayed cannot fully grasp the pain of broken trust. And one who has never tasted bone-deep loneliness will never comprehend the power of a touch, a meeting of eyes filled with understanding. This is what makes the broken open empath different. The wound turns them into a mirror. When someone tells you they are sinking into an abyss, you don't need to imagine. You have been there. You know its flavor. When someone says they have no reason to go on, you do not answer with theory, you answer with presence, because you yourself once continued when no reason remained. And that is wisdom, not hollow advice, but the profound affirmation, I have been through it, and I know you can too. In ancient philosophy, there is a beautiful image, the pearl. A pearl is not born of perfection, but of a wound. When a grain of sand enters the shell, it hurts the oyster. Instead of letting the grain kill it, the oyster secretes a substance, layer upon layer, over the years. That wound becomes a luminous pearl. So it is with the empath's wound. If transformed, pain becomes the pearl of wisdom the world admires. Transformation does not happen automatically. It requires a choice. The empath must choose not to stop at pain, but to move through it. They must choose not to remain trapped in the role of the victim, but to let the wound become the material of their growth. They must choose to sit with their shadow, to speak with the long-exiled wolf, and to allow the flame in the ashes to rise. Then something remarkable occurs. The wound becomes the teacher. It teaches you patience, because you know healing never happens overnight. It teaches you humility, because you know anyone can break. It teaches you compassion, because you realize everyone is fighting a silent battle. And it teaches you courage, because only those who dare to look into the wound will find the light behind it. Wisdom from the wound doesn't only change how you see yourself, it changes how you see the world. You no longer rush to judge others, because you understand their behavior often springs from wounds they don't know how to tend. You no longer need to prove you're right, because you know truth does not need to be shouted, it resounds on its own in silence. And you are no longer afraid of the dark, because you have learned to find fire in the deepest night. This is also when you realize you are no longer who you once were. The person who was afraid, who begged for love, who doubted themselves, has been replaced by a soul with roots. Those roots reach deep into the darkness you have traversed. Therefore, no wind can easily knock you down. You become like an ancient tree. You need prove nothing, you need show nothing, simply standing there. You are a testament. The world needs such souls. In a society where people so easily flee, conceal, and varnish, the presence of someone who lives honestly with their wounds is medicine. It reminds us that suffering is not the end, that breaking does not mean annihilation, that from ashes a new flame can be born. An Eastern saying goes, "The lotus grows from the mud, yet is not stained by it. The lotus does not deny the mud, nor avoid it. It grows from it, through it, and the mud is the very condition for its bloom." So it is with the broken open empath. The wound does not defile them, it makes them a rare lotus in this world. Thus, transformation is not the denial of the wound, but the honoring of it, not by boasting, but by living. To live with tenderness that is no longer naive, but steady. To love in a way no longer blind, but discerning. To hope in a way no longer fanciful, but fire-tested. The wound will always be a part of you. But instead of a chain, it becomes wings. Wings that do not carry you away from darkness, but through it, so that when you emerge, you carry both light and shadow, both sorrow and wisdom as a whole soul. That is the power of transformation. To turn what once made you fall into the very thing that lifts you up, to turn pain into a pearl, to turn darkness into a lantern, to turn brokenness into the undying song of a soul that has learned not only to survive, but to illuminate others. Once the wound has been transformed into wisdom, the empath's journey enters a new phase, awakening. This is no longer just about survival or merely keeping the flame. It is a rebirth into a new way of being. The awakened empath is no longer defined by pain, but by freedom. And alongside that freedom comes a sacred duty, responsibility to oneself and to the world. The freedom we speak of is not external money, status, or the choice of where to live. It is inner freedom. Freedom from the chains of fear, from dependence on others' gaze, from the manipulative games of those who once exploited your sensitivity. When an empath awakens, they no longer need anyone to validate their worth, because that worth has been engraved by the very journey through darkness. But that freedom is not irresponsibility. It does not license you to grow cold or indifferent to the world's suffering. On the contrary, precisely because you have walked through darkness, you know more than anyone the weight of pain, and thus you are called to be a witness, to be present, to shed light, to remind others that they too can make it through. This is the responsibility of the awakened empath. That responsibility does not mean you must save everyone. One of the deepest lessons an empath must learn is, you are not the savior. You cannot and need not carry all the world's darkness. What you can do is become a point of light, not to haul everyone up by your own strength, but to show them that they can stand up by their own. The awakened empath knows how to set boundaries. They can say yes to compassion and also no to exploitation. They understand that true love is not the self-sacrifice that empties you out, but the giving that flows from fullness. For when you have learned to love yourself, the love you offer the world is no longer compensation for a wound, but a natural overflow. In this state, your presence becomes strangely powerful. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to shout to be heard. You only need to be present. And that presence itself becomes influence. Others feel peace beside you because you do not try to fix them, control them, or judge them. You are simply living proof of healing. There is a beautiful paradox here. When the empath awakens, they stop searching for power outside. They realize the greatest power is the ability to hold their own center, even when the world around is in chaos. They are like a great tree in a storm. The wind may strip many branches, but the roots sink so deep that the trunk does not sway. From that freedom arises your highest responsibility, to live truthfully, not hiding your scars, not wearing masks to please others, not imprisoning yourself in the roles of victim or savior. Truthfulness becomes the greatest gift you offer life. In a world of illusion and deceit, the presence of one truthful person is the most powerful way to kindle light. The awakened empath's responsibility is also to pass the flame. You do not live for yourself alone. You are part of humanity's river, and your story is a map for those who come after. By telling it, sharing it, or simply living fully, you leave footprints for souls who are lost in the dark. In Jungian thought, this journey is called individuation, the process of uniting with one's whole self, moving beyond the shadow and the persona to touch the true soul. The awakened empath is a living image of this process. No longer a mirror that only reflects others' darkness, they become a mirror of inner light, light that does not glare but guides. Then a simple yet profound truth appears. Freedom and responsibility are not opposites. They complete each other. Freedom releases you from the chains of the past, while responsibility keeps you from dissolving into meaninglessness. Freedom lets you fly. Responsibility is the wings that keep you from falling. Freedom is the fire. Responsibility is the vessel that holds it. Only with both can you become a steady lamp in humanity's long night. In the end, the empath's awakening is not a distant state, but a daily act. Each day you choose truth over pretense. Each day you choose boundaries over violation. Each day you choose loyalty to your inner flame, rather than trading it for acceptance. That is freedom, and that is responsibility. The awakened empath is not a perfect image. They still tremble, still have tender days, still shed tears at times. Yet even in those moments they know they are no longer defined by fear or by wounds. They have chosen to live as a lamp, humble, steadfast, and honest. And that alone fulfills the greatest duty of their soul. When the empath awakens, they no longer carry only their personal story. Another door opens. They begin to perceive the collective shadow. What was once a personal wound is now seen as part of humanity's shared wound. From that moment, their journey no longer stops at self-healing. It becomes a mission that rises beyond the personal I. Look at the world around us. Wars, religious conflicts, political polarization, the ravaging of nature. None of these are random phenomena. They are reflections of the shadows we refuse to face. Greed, fear, lust for power, buried shame all swirling together, projected outward into history and society. Carl Jung once said, "What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate." Indeed, the collective shadow that humanity denies is precisely what is shaping our common destiny. In that larger picture, the empath carries a unique role. Because they are more sensitive, they become a mirror for collective pain. They feel injustice even when it doesn't directly involve them. They ache over the suffering of strangers. They lose sleep not only over their own wounds, but because they clearly sense the fracture unfolding in the human soul. What others can ignore, the empath hears like a bell ringing straight into the heart. This is a gift, but also a burden. Without discernment, an empath can become an unwitting bearer of the collective shadow. They shoulder the fatigue of society, feeling drained by the news and global tragedies. But once they learn to keep the flame and set boundaries, they realize their task is not to carry it for others, but to shine. What does it mean to shine? It isn't becoming a spokesperson for the whole world, nor assuming the duty to save humanity. It begins with small acts, staying truthful in a dishonest culture, keeping compassion in a cold world, finding the courage to speak truth while others stay silent. These simple acts are how an empath influences the collective dark. Remember, light does not need to be large to dispel darkness. It only needs to be present. A single candle in a closed room can push back the night. A truthful heart can kindle hope for an entire community. And a soul that has walked through fire and learned transformation can become an anchor for many who are fumbling in the dark. The awakened empath also begins to see that the collective shadow is not something distant. It lives in each of us. When we face our inner darkness, anger, selfishness, fear, we help soothe the darkness we share. When we dare to forgive ourselves, we open the door to forgiving others. When we stop judging ourselves, we judge society less. Personal healing and collective healing cannot be separated. This is when the empath moves from surviving victim to keeper of the communal flame. They no longer ask, "How will I survive?" but begin to ask, "What can my presence do for this world?" That question doesn't arise from a savior complex, but from the natural awareness of a soul that knows itself as part of a greater whole. In Eastern tradition, there is the bodhisattva beings who choose to remain in the world, to help others even when they could be liberated. In some measure, the awakened empath carries this spirit. They do not flee the world to seek absolute safety. They choose to remain, to participate, to be present, understanding that darkness can only be healed from within and that each soul is part of that process. Crucially, they do not let this responsibility crush them. They know they are one flame among millions. And they trust that when each empath accepts the responsibility to shine within their small circle, the light will resonate, multiply, and gradually shift the energetic field of humanity. Thus, the empath and the collective shadow are not two opposing entities. They are two sides of the same journey. When an empath dares to live fully with their personal darkness, they unwittingly open a path for humanity to face its shared shadow. And when they keep the flame within, they help ensure the world's fire is not extinguished. This is the mission beyond the personal self, to live as part of a larger current, no longer sealed within a private story, no longer confined to a name, a body, or a past, but seen as a piece of the grand mosaic of human evolution. And then you realize, every tear you shed, every wound you carried, every time you rose, none of it is merely your story. It is the story of humanity. If the previous part shows that the empath bears a calling to face and transmute the collective shadow, the next step reveals another role, the empath as a bridge. They do not live only for themselves, nor only as keepers of the communal flame. They become those who connect two worlds, the world of conscious light and the world of unconscious shadow, the small human world and the vast world of spirit. Picture a bridge spanning a chasm. One side is the shore of fear, doubt, and chaos. The other is understanding, freedom, and love. People often linger on the first bank, lost in suffering, unaware a passage exists to the other side. The empath, having fallen into the abyss and climbed back from the depths, becomes living proof that the bridge is real. But to become a bridge, you must accept both shores. If you stand only with the light and deny the dark, you become a dreamer. If you remain only in darkness and reject the light, you sink into despair. The empath becomes a bridge only by walking between the two, carrying their own darkness, while keeping a steady flame to guide the way. This explains why empaths often live as a paradox, both fragile and resilient, trembling and unyielding, carrying memories of night while emanating a strange light that draws others near. This very paradox makes them a bridge, because they understand both sides. They can sit with one who is falling into despair without fear, because they have been there. And they can point to the light on the far shore, because they have crossed before. Across many cultures, the image of the bridge is tied to the soul. The Vikings spoke of Bifrost, the rainbow bridge to Valhalla. In Persian myth, there is the Chinvat bridge, which souls must cross after death to meet judgment. In Jungian thought, the empath holds the transcendent function, the bridge between consciousness and the unconscious, where shadow and light meet to create wholeness. The broken open empath, having undergone transformation, embodies this function. They no longer live solely in a private tale. They become a symbol of humanity's journey from fracture to coherence, despair to hope, darkness to light. They are living proof that the bridge is not an illusion, it exists, and anyone can cross it. But becoming a bridge brings a test, not allowing yourself to be trampled into a mere roadway. A sturdy bridge isn't one people misuse at will. It is maintained, protected, bounded. The awakened empath knows that to connect two worlds, they must preserve their inner structure. Without that, they will collapse under the weight of too much darkness. Therefore, the bridge's responsibility is not only to connect, but to remain sound. The empath must learn to nourish body, mind, and spirit, to rest, to say enough when depleted. Only when tended can the bridge endure and guide others safely across. To be a bridge also means learning to translate between two languages. You understand the language of darkness, nightmares, fears, unruly feelings most dare not name. And you understand the language of light, hope, love, wisdom that rises beyond suffering. Your role is interpreter, carrying messages from one side to the other. Along the way, you become keeper of both worlds' secrets. You may have thought this role too grand, too heavy. In truth, it starts with the smallest acts. When you listen to a suffering friend without judgment, you have become a bridge. When you speak truth in a space full of lies, you have become a bridge. When you choose love in a moment everyone else chooses hate, you have become a bridge. These small acts, repeated, are how you build the sturdy crossing the world needs. The empath becomes a bridge, not to elevate themselves as special, but to remind humanity. Anyone can cross. Anyone can reconcile their inner darkness and light. Anyone can find wholeness if they dare to step onto the path. And thanks to the souls who have gone ahead, becoming bridges, others find the courage to follow. Ultimately, The role of the bridge belongs not only to individual empaths, but to humanity as a whole. Look closely and you'll see. The human journey is the building of a bridge from violence to love, from division to unity, from ignorance to awareness. And the empath, through their very experience of fracture and transformation, is a living microcosm of that journey. You are the bridge. And with every step you take, every choice you make, you lay another stone in the foundation of our shared crossing a bridge, not only for you, but for the entire world. A torch is not only for the present, it is the memory of fire, a testament that light was once kindled and that the next generation's task is to keep it burning. Once the empath has awakened and become a bridge between worlds, they realize their life does not end with a personal tale. Every step they take plants a seed for the future. Think of the people who once inspired you. It might have been a quiet teacher, a friend who held your hand at the brink of despair, or even a character in a book who gave words to your unspoken heart. They were the torches you encountered along the way. And now it is your turn, you, the empath who broke and then rose to become a torch for someone you've never met. The legacy of an empath is not castles or wealth, but the capacity to pass on inner light. When you live truthfully, you leave an imprint on children watching you from afar. When you choose compassion over bitterness, you plant a seed in someone's soul, and that seed may one day grow into a forest long after you are gone. The miracle of a torch is this: it loses nothing by sharing its flame. A single candle can light hundreds of others and still burn just as brightly. So it is with the empath. When you share your light through a word of encouragement, a sincere act, or simply a calm, steady presence, you do not lose energy. On the contrary, the light spreads, multiplies, and becomes a living legacy beyond your reach. Yet for the torch to burn steadily, it needs fuel and protection. So does the empath. You cannot become a legacy for tomorrow if you do not nourish your own soul today. A flame snuffed out by the wind cannot guide anyone. Your first responsibility, then, is to safeguard the inner light, with honesty, with boundaries, and with moments of pause, breathing, and reconnecting to your deepest source. The empath's torch must also learn an important lesson. Do not force anyone to receive your light. Some souls are not ready and still wander the dark. Your light is not for coercion, but for invitation. When they are ready, they will come. Then the legacy you leave will find good soil in which to take root. Imagine a new generation growing up. They look around and see a world of upheaval, injustice, and chaos. They feel afraid just as you once did. Then they meet you or someone you inspired. In their eyes, a recognition flickers. If you survived, if you turned wounds into strength, then they can too. This is your legacy, giving the next generation the certainty that darkness is not the end. Many mystical traditions speak of lineage, a chain of teacher and student. No awakened person stands alone. Each is a link in a long current of wisdom. The empath is the same. You are a link between past and future. You received light from earlier torches, perhaps parents, teachers, or unknown souls who marked you through books, art, or teachings. And now you become the next link, passing that light to those who will come after. Your legacy may never be etched in history books, but it will live in other hearts, in the way a child grows up knowing they are worthy of love, in the way a friend dares to set boundaries to protect themselves, in the way a small community holds onto its humanity in chaotic times. All of this, in some way, began with your choice, not to let the wound devour you, but to turn it into light. Here is the final truth about legacy. It does not lie in what you say, but in how you live. People may forget your words, but they will not forget how they felt in your presence. They may not recall the details of your story, but they will remember the light you radiated. And that light, through them, will keep spreading, becoming an endless river of fire, illuminating humankind. The empath is a torch. That torch does not shine only for itself or only for its community. It becomes a legacy for those yet to come. And when you depart, the light does not go out. It continues to burn in the millions of torches you helped ignite. There is a truth few notice. What we do today does not end today. Every word, every choice, every act leaves a trace in another's memory, in a community's current, in humanity's collective remembrance. A broken open empath, having passed through darkness, understands this more keenly than anyone. Your very presence is a living message, a flame that illuminates the present and bequeaths a legacy to the future. Remember history. Some torches changed the world. Socrates accepted death to defend truth, and from his passing the flame of knowledge has burned for 2,500 years. The Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, facing the inner night, and from that awakening millions found a path to liberation. Those torches still burn not in matter, but as an invisible influence across generations. So it is with the empath. You may not be a philosopher or a saint, yet your small daily choices to live truthfully, to guard your boundaries, to dare to love without losing yourself, are lights you leave to the world. You may never know it, but a child who watched you rise from pain will learn resilience. A friend who received your comfort will learn to pass on kindness. These seemingly nameless fragments become the unbroken line of flame that never goes out. The empath's legacy is not only love, but courage. A torch is most beautiful not when the air is still, but when it faces wind and storm and keeps burning. You survived betrayal, walked through loneliness, stood before the edge of despair, and still kept an ember alive. That speaks louder than any lecture. A person may break, but they need never be extinguished. Notice, a torch does not burn for itself. It exists to give light to others. But unlike blind self-sacrifice, the torch teaches this lesson. To burn does not mean self-destruction. It means turning existence itself into illumination. The empath must learn this too. You are not here to be exploited, to be a candle drained in someone else's hands. You are here to shine, to guide, to inspire. To do so, you must protect your flame with awareness, with healthy limits, and with the discipline of tending yourself before giving. In spiritual language, there is the keeper of the fire. In tribal life, these are the ones who sit through the night by the sacred blaze, ensuring it never dies, for the fire is the life of the whole community. The awakened empath is humanity's firekeeper. You tend the fire of humaneness in a sometimes cold world, the fire of love in a sometimes indifferent society, the fire of truth in an age of deceit. And when you pass that fire to the next generation, you are no longer a mere individual. You are a bridge for an entire current. Remember, too, legacy is never only grand and distant. It may begin with a smile to a stranger, an embrace for a friend, a whispered affirmation to yourself, I deserve to live. These moments, small as they seem, are the first sparks that can ignite a whole generation. And when you are gone, what remains? Not the assets you amassed, not the status you chased. What remains is the light you planted in other hearts. A word of comfort remembered for a lifetime. An example of bravery that made someone stronger. A presence that kept a person from letting go in the night. That is your legacy, the torch that never goes out. So never underestimate yourself. Do not think your quiet choices go unseen. Every flame has value. And if today you tremble and feel too small, remember, it may be your faint light that is saving a soul you'll never know. In an age many call chaotic, where falsehood travels faster than truth, where division is fanned more easily than compassion, where people grow, estranged, even sitting side by side, the presence of empathic souls has never been more urgent. Those once broken empaths know their responsibility does not end with private affairs, because the light they carry is not just for a single room. It keeps warmth alive for all humanity. And by their lived experience of surviving fracture, they become the firekeepers. Keeping the fire is not a pretty slogan, but a daily act. It is your steady choice to speak truth amid apathy. It is the way you look into the eyes of someone in despair, not to wipe away their pain, but to stay, to offer presence, so they know they are not alone. It is the act of protecting your small inner flame against harsh winds, ridicule, and the pressures of a world that would rather harden you. A firekeeper must remember, you cannot give light if you are extinguished within. Thus, your first duty is always to yourself nourish, set boundaries, regenerate, and care for the cleanliness of your heart. No one can do that for you. But the flame was never meant for you alone. Since ancient times, firekeepers knew they kept watch not to warm one person, but to keep the whole tribe alive. Today's empaths are the same. When you share your experience, open your heart, and allow connection with kindred souls, you weave a network of light. One torch can illumine a house. 1,000 torches can light a square. In chaotic times, the empathic community becomes way stations of fire across the land. One flame may falter, but the others nearby will keep the light from ever going out. And beyond that, you need to recognize that the smallest choices you make each day quietly contribute to the collective energetic field of humanity. When you choose forgiveness instead of clinging to resentment, you soften a wave of tension in the invisible space we all share. When you choose honesty instead of concealment, you brighten one shard of truth in a dense sea of darkness. When you choose love with boundaries, you send a message to the next generation that love is not blind self-sacrifice, but an awakened strength. Empaths keep the fire by their everyday presence, not by grand speeches. And at times that presence matters more than any words. You may have asked yourself, why was I born into this era? Why must I endure so much? The answer isn't easy to accept, but it is always true, because the world needs you. The chaos is a summons, a training ground, a fire that tests and refines. Without darkness, your light could not be seen. Without upheaval, your sensitive heart would not find its calling. This turbulent age is not an accident. It is an opportunity for empaths who have known brokenness to rise and become living proof that one can remain sensitive and still cross the long night without becoming the night. Empaths do not come to run from darkness. You come to turn that very darkness into fuel for light. Therefore, whenever the world falls into crisis, remember that you are not a victim, you are the torch. And that torch, if tended and wisely shared, will not only save you, but also those groping their way through the night. As this long journey nears its end, you might ask, after all these words and images of fracture and light, of shadow and flame, what truly remains in your heart? I want you to pause and feel not only with your mind, but with your whole body. Listen to your heartbeat now. Feel the breath moving through your chest. The truth is, the very fact that you are still here, still listening, still wanting to understand your path, is proof of your soul's resilient life force. You were once broken, but brokenness did not erase you. On the contrary, it opened a door through which you would never have discovered who you are otherwise. The wholeness we seek is not a return to an unscathed state before harm. None of us can rewind time to erase loss or deny scars. But we can learn to see differently. Wholeness is not the absence of cracks. It is knowing how to let light pass through them. Wholeness is not sealing every gap. It is allowing those spaces to become rooms where the soul can breathe. Wholeness is when you can look into your own darkness without trembling, when you can love even the parts you once wished to hide. Those who have walked through darkness carry a knowledge no classroom can teach. The knowledge of human fragility, of the loneliness beyond language, and of the quiet strength that arises when everything collapses. And when they stand again, they become ones who can hold two poles in a single heart, able to tremble with another's pain while holding boundaries so as not to dissolve, able to love and also to refuse, able to bow to share the burden, and also to stand upright to protect themselves. That is wholeness, the harmony of opposites. Remember, you no longer have to define yourself by the label broken. Brokenness is an event, not your essence. Your essence is the one who survived, who learned the language of shadow and light, who can stand in chaos and still keep the inner flame. You can look back with gratitude, not because what you endured was fair, but because it is what forged your growth and deepened your reverence for life. When you step out from here, the outer world may not change at once. There will still be callous people, harsh words, unjust systems. But one thing will have changed for certain. the way you walk. You no longer move as one seeking validation from the outside, but as a torch that has found fire within. You no longer see darkness as an enemy, but as part of the path. You no longer see yourself as a victim, but as a keeper, a bearer of fire, a survivor who carries the legacy of resilience. And from that shift, the world will change as well. Each time you live truthfully, you permit others to do the same. Each time you dare to love while keeping boundaries, you teach the next generation that love does not equal self-erasure. Each time you quietly sit beside a suffering soul, you help soften a portion of the collective shadow. These acts, however small, are golden threads woven into humanity's great tapestry. You may never be recorded in history, but you will be remembered in the hearts that have touched yours. And those memories will spread, multiply, and become part of the invisible current linking generations. That is the empath's legacy, needing no fame, no throne, only honest presence and steadfast light. Before we close, remember one last thing. Even in the moments you feel weakest, you carry an inextinguishable flame. It is the flame that carried you through long nights, that kept you alive, that brought you to these words today. When you honor it, tend it, and share it wisely, you will realize you were never truly shattered. You were opened to become a larger space for life, for love, for light. So step into the world not as a wounded one begging for acceptance, but as a soul reconciled with itself. Walk as a torch, sometimes flickering, sometimes wavering, but always faithful to the light. Walk as a breathing temple, cracked, yes, yet radiant where the light streams through. Walk as proof that even within brokenness there is a sacred power, the power to turn suffering into wisdom, shadow into flame, and solitude into a legacy for those who follow. And when one day someone looks at you and says, "Because of you, I did not give up," you will know your journey was never in vain. Your flame has burned, has spread, and has become part of the endless light. And that is enough.